Benjamin Carter, a retired millionaire in his late 70s, found himself on the edge of a rural road in Tennessee, his luxury sedan parked awkwardly by the shoulder. The smooth hum of the engine had been replaced by the sharp throb of a flat tire. He cursed under his breath, staring at the deflated rubber. The tire hadn't just gone flat. It had betrayed him at the worst possible moment, miles from the nearest town and far beyond the reach of his usual conveniences. Benjamin had always been the one in control. He had built his empire from the ground up with precision and strategy, always planning, always commanding. Yet now, as he sat behind the wheel of his high-end car, staring at the flat tire, he felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. For the first time in years, Benjamin realized he was completely at the mercy of circumstance and of those around him. He tried calling for roadside assistance, his fingers tapping against the sleek screen of his phone, but there was no signal. The nearest town was probably an hour away, but the thought of waiting around for help made his skin crawl. This wasn't the way things were supposed to go. He wasn't the type to rely on others. After all, he had people for that. Assistants, drivers, advisors. There was no place for helplessness in his world. As the minutes ticked by, frustration began to gnaw at him. He leaned back in his seat and let out a heavy sigh, his eyes scanning the empty road. A part of him wanted to just get out and attempt to change the tire himself, but the idea of getting his hands dirty was simply unthinkable. Benjamin had grown accustomed to a life of ease and luxury, far removed from the manual labor that came with the rough edges of everyday life. Just as the frustration threatened to take hold, a figure appeared in his rearview mirror. At first, he thought it was just another passerby, but as the figure grew closer, Benjamin saw it was a boy, no older than 13, walking barefoot along the gravel shoulder. He was dressed in worn clothes, with faded jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His sneakers, too, were old and scuffed, barely held together by fraying laces. The boy didn't look like the sort who would need to be asked twice to offer assistance. Instead, he walked up to Benjamin's window without hesitation, his face calm and unbothered by the heat of the day or the dust kicked up by passing cars. Benjamin rolled down the window, surprised by the directness of the boy's approach. "Hey, mister," the boy said, his voice steady. "You need some help?" Benjamin blinked, taken aback by the question. He had expected an offer, maybe, but not from a kid in ragged clothes with a nonchalant air about him. I do," Benjamin admitted, his tone softer than usual. The words felt strange on his tongue, unfamiliar in a life where he rarely had to ask for help. "I've got a flat tire, and I don't think I can do it myself." Boy looked at the car, then back at Benjamin, his eyes scanning the luxury sedan with an almost knowing look. "I can fix it for you," he said without a hint of doubt, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Benjamin stared at him, momentarily dumbfounded. The boy wasn't asking for money, wasn't offering help out of a sense of obligation. He simply believed he could do it. There was a quiet confidence in the way he stood there, unaffected by the heat, by the dirt, or by anything that might intimidate an adult. Benjamin hadn't expected this. "Well," Benjamin said after a long pause, still uncertain, "if you're sure." The boy smiled, just a flicker of amusement passing across his face. Without another word, he walked over to the trunk of the car and pulled out the spare tire and jack. His movements were swift and confident, showing a calm competence that made Benjamin feel, for the first time in a long while, almost unnecessary. As Aaron worked, Benjamin sat back in his car, watching the boy's quiet determination. There was something humbling in the way he handled the tools, his every motion purposeful, focused, and efficient. It was a stark contrast to the high-powered world Benjamin had come from, a world where everything was about transactions, influence, and control. Here, in the middle of nowhere, a young boy was fixing his tire without expecting anything in return, and Benjamin couldn't help but feel a tug at his conscience. The boy didn't hurry. He took his time, loosening the lug nuts one by one, raising the car with practiced ease, then swapping out the flat for the spare. All the while, Benjamin felt a growing sense of amazement at how effortlessly the boy worked. There was no need for ego, no pretense, just the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned the value of self-reliance. "Done," Aaron said after a few minutes, standing up to admire his work. He wiped his hands on his jeans, a small but satisfied grin on his face. Benjamin was speechless for a moment, unsure how to react. You're you're good at that, he finally said, shaking his head in disbelief. Aaron shrugged, his face unreadable. It's just something I learned from my dad. He always said you shouldn't wait for others to do things you can do yourself. Benjamin didn't know what to say. The boy had no hesitation, no fear of a job most adults would avoid. And yet, it wasn't just the tire he had fixed. It felt like Aaron had mended something deeper inside Benjamin, a reminder of the values he had long forgotten. Thank you, Benjamin said quietly, his voice softer than he intended. Aaron gave a small nod, brushing dirt off his hands. No problem. Glad to help. Benjamin, taken aback by the boy's humility, reached for his wallet. Here, he said, holding out $100 bill. It's the least I can do. But Aaron shook his head, the hint of a smile still on his lips. I don't need it. Just helping out. Benjamin stared at him, momentarily speechless. The idea of turning down money, especially for a job so well done, was completely foreign to him. Yet here was this boy, offering help without expecting anything in return, not even a simple thank you in the form of cash. Well, Benjamin said, slipping the bill back into his wallet, you're a rare one, aren't you? Aaron smiled again, this time with a quiet pride. I guess so. He gave a brief nod and started to walk away. Benjamin watched him disappear down the road, his mind swirling with thoughts. This boy, this stranger, had just done something more than change a flat tire. He had made Benjamin reflect on a life that had become all about wealth and power, yet had left something essential behind. For the first time in a long while, Benjamin wasn't thinking about profits or business. He was thinking about something simpler, something he had nearly forgotten: kindness, self-reliance, and the quiet joy of helping others. Benjamin sat there for a long moment, watching Aaron's retreating figure fade into the distance. The hum of the world around him seemed quieter now, as though everything had slowed to match the stillness inside him. It wasn't just the flat tire that had been fixed. It was something deeper, something he hadn't expected to feel today. He shook his head, trying to shake the feeling, but it lingered. The boy had left him with more than just a working car. Aaron had sparked something in him that Benjamin hadn't felt in years: humility. For most of his life, Benjamin had relied on his wealth to solve his problems. Money could buy the finest lawyers, the best cars, the most luxurious homes, but it couldn't buy what Aaron had just shown him: a quiet, humble competence and an effortless kindness that he hadn't seen in ages. It was the kind of thing that Benjamin realized he had missed somewhere along the way, lost amidst the high-powered transactions and the relentless pursuit of success. Benjamin glanced at the freshly fixed tire, still unsure how to process the encounter. He wasn't used to feeling humbled, not by the wealthy, certainly not by the powerful, and certainly not by a young boy dressed in ragged clothes. But as he started the engine and eased the car back onto the road, he couldn't shake the thought: why had Aaron helped him? It wasn't just the task at hand. No, the way the boy had done it, without any expectation, without asking for anything in return, spoke volumes about him. This wasn't just a kid who was fixing a tire for a stranger. This was a kid with something Benjamin hadn't seen in a long time: integrity. As Benjamin drove away, the landscape outside the car window seemed to stretch endlessly, the rolling hills of Tennessee blending into the horizon. But his mind was far from the road. Thoughts about Aaron's calm demeanor, his self-reliance, and his refusal to take money occupied every part of his mind. Benjamin had been in enough high-stakes boardrooms to recognize value when he saw it, but this was something else entirely. By the time Benjamin reached his home, the feeling hadn't dissipated. His mansion, an imposing structure filled with opulent furnishings and grandiose spaces, felt distant to him now, cold and impersonal. He had built it all. He had created a life of wealth and luxury, of success and power. But as he walked through the front door, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty halls, it felt hollow. He sank into his favorite chair in the study, a leather armchair with a view of his sprawling estate. But no matter where he looked, all he could think of was Aaron. His quiet confidence, the warmth in his eyes, the way he had simply done what needed to be done. It was a stark contrast to the cutthroat world he had built for himself. Benjamin had become used to thinking that power, wealth, and influence were the only things that mattered. But Aaron had just shown him that something far more important existed: kindness, humility, and generosity. He found himself standing up, pacing the room, and finally, after what felt like hours, he made a decision. I need to find him. Benjamin didn't know why, but something about the boy's quiet strength called to him. Maybe it was the realization that in all his years of success, he had never once encountered anyone like Aaron, a person who gave simply to give, without a hint of ego or self-interest. His mind made up, Benjamin grabbed his coat, headed to his car, and drove off into the night, the image of Aaron's face firmly etched in his thoughts. He would find him. He had to. Because for the first time in years, Benjamin wasn't looking for a business deal or an investment opportunity. He was looking for something much more valuable, something that couldn't be bought with money, something that could only be learned. And that something was a lesson in generosity, in kindness, and in living a life of purpose beyond the accumulation of wealth. As Benjamin drove through the quiet streets of the nearby towns, the deep silence seemed to speak to him. Perhaps Aaron wasn't just a boy he had met by chance. Perhaps Aaron was the key to something more, the kind of life that Benjamin had long forgotten, and that, deep down, he had always wanted. Benjamin's mind raced as the road unfolded before him, the familiar path now feeling unfamiliar. The sense of purpose that had driven him for decades, building wealth, accumulating influence, securing his place in the world, seemed so distant now. For years, he had chased after things that, in the end, didn't seem to satisfy. The vast, empty estate he had created for himself was a monument to his success, but it felt more like a prison now. Each room, each polished surface reflected his accomplishments, but they also whispered of his isolation. Sitting behind the wheel of his car, Benjamin replayed the encounter with Aaron in his mind. The boy had been so grounded, so unpretentious. Aaron's simplicity, his willingness to help without any expectation of reward, struck a chord deep within Benjamin. It was an unspoken contrast to everything Benjamin had spent his life chasing. When was the last time someone had done something for him without expecting something in return? The question lingered, making Benjamin uncomfortable. It was easy to assume that in his world of power and wealth, everyone around him had their own agenda. Even those who smiled and shook his hand were likely calculating how to benefit from his favor. But Aaron? Aaron had been different. The boy had helped him without hesitation, without any thought of gain. He had done it because it was simply the right thing to do. As Benjamin drove aimlessly through the countryside, he wondered if he could find that same simplicity in his own life. He thought of his younger years, before he had become the man he was today. He remembered the time when helping others wasn't a strategic move or a means to an end. He remembered a time when he, too, had given just to give, without worrying about what he could get in return. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. As he pulled into his driveway, the gates to his estate opening automatically before him, Benjamin realized he wasn't ready to go back inside, back to the emptiness of his own life. Not yet. There was something more out there, something that had been stirred by Aaron's quiet kindness, something Benjamin couldn't name but knew was calling him. For the first time in years, he felt restless. He had seen a glimpse of something pure, something real. It was almost like an itch he couldn't scratch, a need to understand. Benjamin parked the car at the far end of the driveway, far from the house, and sat there in the stillness, staring out at the horizon. He didn't know where his path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was lost. He felt a spark, a quiet fire inside him, something that beckoned him to seek out what had been left behind, the values, the connections, the simple kindnesses that had once guided him, but had been overshadowed by the trappings of success. The next morning, Benjamin woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in decades. He wasn't sure what exactly he was looking for, but he knew it began with Aaron. He had to find him again, to learn from him, to understand how a young boy, living a life so different from his own, could possess something so valuable that Benjamin had lost along the way. Benjamin didn't just want to help Aaron. He wanted to learn from him. He wanted to rediscover what it meant to live with integrity, to help without strings attached, to value things that couldn't be bought. With that thought in mind, he set his course. He would find Aaron, not just to repay him for the kindness he had shown, but to seek out something far more important, a lesson in living, in giving, in being. Something that Benjamin had once known but had forgotten in his pursuit of a world built on material success. This wasn't about wealth or power. It was about something deeper, something that transcended money and status. And if Benjamin had learned anything from his encounter with Aaron, it was that the greatest wealth came from the smallest acts of kindness. Benjamin's heart was full as he made the decision. It wasn't just about finding Aaron anymore. It was about finding himself. The next morning, Benjamin wasted no time. He didn't want to waste another moment stewing in the discomfort of his own thoughts. His mind was fixed on Aaron, that boy with such quiet wisdom and genuine selflessness. He needed to find him, but not for the reasons he had once thought. This wasn't about fulfilling a debt or rescuing someone. This was about rediscovering the simple virtues of kindness and community that had eluded him for so long. Benjamin had always been a man of action, and this time, he knew exactly where to start. His first stop was the small town near where he'd encountered Aaron, Cedar Ridge. He had no idea what he was walking into, but that didn't matter. He had to start somewhere. As Benjamin's sleek luxury car rumbled through the winding roads leading away from his estate and into the rural heart of Tennessee, he couldn't help but feel the contrast between his life and the world around him. The tall buildings, the polished marble floors, and the endless meetings all seemed so distant now. The deeper he traveled into the countryside, the more his thoughts seemed to clear, replaced by a sense of focus he hadn't felt in years. It didn't take long before Benjamin reached Cedar Ridge, a small town tucked neatly between the Appalachian foothills. The town was a far cry from the sprawling suburbs of his own life. Modest houses lined narrow streets, and the homes were built close together, as if the people here wanted to be near one another. There was a warmth in the air, an energy he hadn't realized he'd missed. He parked his car in front of a small diner, asking the waitress for directions. She was older, with a tired smile, but her eyes lit up when Benjamin mentioned Aaron. "Aaron? Huh? You mean that boy who helped you on the side of the road?" she asked, setting a mug of coffee in front of him. "Yes, exactly," Benjamin replied. "Do you know where I can find him?" The woman leaned in slightly, her voice lowering. "He lives on the outskirts of town, near the old mill. You can't miss it, a little house at the edge of the woods. But, well, people around here don't always talk much about him." Benjamin thanked her and paid for the coffee, the coins clinking in his palm as he left a generous tip. He hadn't come here to be a tourist. He had come to find Aaron and understand the depth of the boy's generosity. With a determined look on his face, he drove in the direction the waitress had indicated, soon leaving behind the town's few main streets and heading down an unpaved road that seemed to disappear into the woods. The houses here were simpler, more worn, each with a well-tended garden or a row of chickens pecking at the dirt. This wasn't the kind of place Benjamin was used to. It was raw and real, untouched by the glossy sheen of high society. When he finally arrived at Aaron's house, it stood quietly at the edge of a small clearing. The house was weathered, its wood grayed by time and the elements, but it had a charm about it. Benjamin parked his car at the edge of the driveway and got out, walking toward the front door with a mixture of curiosity and humility. He knocked gently, and within moments, the door creaked open. Standing there was a woman in her early 40s, her face framed by dark, shoulder-length hair. She looked at him with a cautious but kind expression. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft yet steady. "Are you Maria?" Benjamin asked. She nodded. "I am. What can I do for you?" "I'm Benjamin Carter," he said, his voice measured but sincere. "I'm looking for your son, Aaron. I met him a few days ago, and I wanted to thank him personally for helping me. He changed my perspective on things." Maria's brow furrowed slightly, but she stepped aside, motioning for Benjamin to enter. "Come in," she said. "I think we need to talk." As Benjamin stepped inside, he felt the warmth of the home instantly. The air smelled of fresh bread and something comforting, like the earth itself. It was small, yet every inch seemed filled with love. The walls were adorned with family photos, some hand-drawn pictures, and little trinkets that made the place feel lived in. "Aaron's out back," Maria said, leading him to the kitchen. "He spends a lot of time working around the house. I suppose you'll want to talk to him." Benjamin nodded, feeling an unexpected sense of anticipation. He had come here with a purpose, but as he stood in the warmth of this humble home, he couldn't help but feel he was about to learn something far more important than just thanking Aaron for a simple act of kindness. Maria handed him a glass of water, her gaze soft but perceptive. I'm sure Aaron doesn't need any special recognition for what he did. He's the type of boy who believes in doing what's right without expecting anything in return. Benjamin glanced at her, taken aback by the simplicity in her words. I understand, he said quietly, but you don't know what it meant to me. For a man like me to be helped by someone like Aaron, it's made me question a lot of things. Maria studied him for a moment before nodding. You're not the first one to say that about Aaron. He has a way of making people see things differently. It's one of his gifts. Benjamin followed her out the back door, his heart beating a little faster with anticipation. He stepped into the backyard, where Aaron was busy repairing a fence that had been weathered by time. The boy's hands worked swiftly, his movements confident but steady. When Aaron saw him, he straightened up, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. Mr. Carter, he said, his voice calm and respectful. I wanted to thank you, Aaron, Benjamin began, his voice full of sincerity. What you did for me, it's something I'll never forget. Aaron shrugged, a humble smile on his face. It was nothing, really. I just saw someone who needed help. Benjamin stood there, taking in the boy's words. It wasn't just the tire that had been changed. It was something inside Benjamin that had been shifted, stirred by this boy's quiet humility. In that moment, Benjamin realized that the life he had built, a life of opulence and prestige, had never given him this kind of fulfillment. Well, it meant a lot to me, Benjamin said. I've been thinking a lot about how things used to be, before all the stuff, and you reminded me of that, of what really matters. Aaron gave him a small smile, then turned back to the fence. I'm glad I could help, Mr. Carter. That's all. Benjamin stood there, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. But as he watched Aaron work, he also felt something else, a quiet, growing sense of admiration. This boy had more wisdom in his hands than Benjamin had ever found in his business deals. As he turned to leave, he knew that his journey had just begun. Aaron had given him more than a simple favor. He had opened Benjamin's eyes to something deeper, something more meaningful. And Benjamin knew that finding this truth was only the first step. He would return. He would come back to Cedar Ridge to learn more from Aaron. Over the next few days, Benjamin found himself returning to Cedar Ridge more frequently, a part of him unexpectedly drawn to the town and its quiet rhythm. It wasn't just about seeking Aaron anymore. It was the town itself, its simplicity, its sense of community. Every visit peeled back layers of his own life, revealing a part of himself that had been buried for decades beneath wealth, status, and the endless chase for success. Benjamin had always believed that people like him were meant to help others. But what he now realized was that there was so much more to giving than simply writing checks or offering monetary support. There was something raw, something deeply human about the way Aaron had helped him without expectation, and he couldn't get it out of his mind. On one of his visits, Benjamin decided to stop by the local diner to ask about the town's history and perhaps learn more about Aaron's family. He figured that understanding where Aaron had come from might give him a clearer picture of who the boy was and why he acted with such grace and generosity. The diner was small, its floors creaky with age, but warm with the kind of welcoming energy only a town like Cedar Ridge could offer. The same waitress who had helped him a few days ago was there again, and when she saw him walk through the door, she gave him a knowing smile. Back again? She said with a teasing tone. What brings you to Cedar Ridge this time, Mr. Carter? Benjamin smiled back, sitting down at the counter. I guess you could say I'm getting to know the place, and I want to know more about Aaron. The waitress raised an eyebrow but didn't press the matter further. Well, Aaron's a good boy. His mom raised him well. They've been through a lot, but they make do. I think he's got something about him that's hard to describe, but it's not just because of the way he helps people. It's how he makes others feel about themselves. Like you. You come here all the time, don't you? Benjamin nodded slowly. I do. And I can't explain it, but there's something here, something that makes me want to keep coming back. The waitress leaned in slightly. That's Cedar Ridge for you. A place like this gets into your soul if you're willing to let it. As for Aaron, he's always been like that. Doesn't matter how much he has or doesn't have, he just believes in doing what's right. Benjamin let her words sink in as he sipped his coffee. It wasn't just about Aaron's kindness. It was about how Aaron's way of living had begun to unlock a part of Benjamin that had been dormant for far too long. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was rushing toward something. He wasn't driven by the need for more success or more wealth. Instead, he felt grounded, as if time had slowed down for him. After finishing his coffee, Benjamin decided to drive out to Aaron's house once more. This time, he knew he wasn't just going to thank Aaron. He had a new purpose in mind, a desire to give back in a way that would be meaningful, not just transactional. When he arrived at Aaron's home, he found the boy outside again, this time working on a small vegetable garden that had been planted along the side of the house. Benjamin stepped out of the car and walked toward him, a sense of calm settling over him. "Aaron," he called softly. The boy turned, his hands covered in dirt, but his smile was wide and easy. "Mr. Carter," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I've been thinking," Benjamin began, his voice steady, "about how you helped me, and about something else too. I realize that I've been living my life in a way that isn't really fulfilling, and I want to change that. I want to learn from you, from this town, from the things I've been missing." Aaron's expression softened. "What do you mean?" Benjamin paused for a moment, considering how to explain what was happening inside him. "I've spent my entire life accumulating things, building an empire, but none of it has ever made me feel whole. And I see something in you, Aaron, a kind of wisdom that I'm just starting to understand. You've lived with less than most, but you have more to offer than I ever have." Aaron didn't respond immediately, his gaze turning back to the garden. He seemed to be contemplating Benjamin's words. Finally, he looked up, his voice thoughtful. "I guess it's not about what you have or what you can do. It's about what you give and how you treat others. I learned that from my mom." Benjamin's heart swelled with a new sense of admiration. This boy, with so little, was teaching him the very things he had forgotten in his relentless pursuit of wealth. "Can I help you with this?" Benjamin asked, gesturing to the garden. Aaron raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sure. I could use a hand with these weeds. You ever gardened before?" Benjamin chuckled, the sound foreign to him. "Not much, but I'm willing to try." Together, they worked in silence, the rhythm of their movements speaking louder than words. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Benjamin realized that this was what he had been missing all along. Connection. Purpose. The kind of joy that didn't come from a bank account or a business deal, but from something deeper, something far more valuable than anything money could buy. As they finished clearing the garden, Benjamin stood back and looked at their work. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. The effort itself had been enough. "Thank you, Aaron," Benjamin said softly. "You've taught me more than I could ever express." Aaron shrugged, the same humble smile on his face. "I didn't do much, just helped out where I could." Benjamin smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. He had been changed, and he owed it all to a boy who knew how to give without expecting anything in return. And as Benjamin drove back to his mansion that evening, it wasn't the luxury of his car or the solitude of his home that he looked forward to. It was the lessons he had learned, the connection he had made with Aaron, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be a part of something greater than himself. The journey was only beginning. The following weeks found Benjamin in an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, he awoke early, but instead of rushing to the office or making calls, he spent his time thinking about what he could do next. Cedar Ridge had changed something in him. The people, their resilience, their quiet generosity, it had all left a mark that was impossible to ignore. Benjamin found himself returning to the small town regularly. He had made it a point to stop by Aaron's house more often, and he found himself drawn to Maria, Aaron's mother as well. She was a woman who had raised her son with values of kindness and humility despite her own hardships. Benjamin was amazed at her ability to make do with so little, yet always with a smile, always with an open heart. One afternoon, as Benjamin arrived at the house, he saw Aaron sitting on the porch, looking out over the surrounding hills. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. And for a moment, Benjamin stood still, watching the boy, noticing the way he seemed at peace in his own skin. He approached Aaron, who turned when he heard Benjamin's footsteps. "You know," Benjamin began, his voice tentative, "I've been thinking a lot about what I said to you the other day, about wanting to learn from you, about the way you live." Aaron gave a small, knowing smile, but didn't interrupt. "I think I've spent most of my life chasing the wrong things," Benjamin continued. "Chasing money, success, and status. But none of it ever made me feel fulfilled. It didn't bring me peace. And lately I've realized that the kind of happiness I want, it's not in luxury. It's in connection, in giving, and in finding meaning." Aaron nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "It's a different kind of peace, isn't it? The kind you get when you're not chasing anything anymore. You're just living, doing the right thing because it's the right thing." Benjamin smiled softly. "Yes, exactly." There was a long pause, and Benjamin noticed how Aaron seemed to be considering something. Then the boy stood up, brushing his hands on his pants. "You're welcome to come to the diner later. Mom's making dinner tonight. You should join us." Benjamin's heart warmed at the invitation. It was simple, no frills, just an open door. But it meant more than anything lavish or expensive could have. "I'd be honored, Aaron." That evening, Benjamin found himself sitting at the small kitchen table in Aaron's home, surrounded by the smell of Maria's cooking and the easy laughter of the family. The food was simple: fried chicken, cornbread, mashed potatoes. But it was made with such care, such love, that Benjamin could taste the difference in every bite. The conversation that evening had been light but full of meaning. They talked about the town, the local news, and the weather. But beneath the small talk, Benjamin felt an unspoken connection that bound them together. It wasn't about wealth or what they could offer each other. It was about being present, sharing moments of life without the need to impress or prove anything. As the evening wore on and the meal came to a close, Maria excused herself to clean up the dishes, leaving Benjamin and Aaron alone at the table. "You know, Benjamin," Aaron began, his tone serious, yet still warm, "I think you've been looking for something your whole life. Maybe you just didn't know what it was. You've done so much in your life, but maybe it's not about all the things you've built. Maybe it's about the lives you've touched." Benjamin sat back, his gaze meeting Aaron's. The boy's words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you for what you've given me, Aaron," Benjamin said quietly. "But I want to help. I want to give back. I've been given so much, and now I see that it's time to share it." Aaron looked at him, a small smile playing on his lips. "You're doing it already." Benjamin nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. He had spent his life accumulating wealth, but now he understood that true wealth wasn't in material things. It was in the connections he made, the people he helped, and the way he lived his life. As Benjamin left Aaron's house that night, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that he would never go back to the way he had lived before, chasing after fleeting accomplishments. His new life would be one of meaning, of community, and of gratitude. And he would begin by helping Aaron and the town of Cedar Ridge in any way he could. In the weeks that followed, Benjamin began to organize charitable efforts in Cedar Ridge. It wasn't about the money. It was about using his resources to make a difference. He funded new education programs for the town, helped rebuild the local library, and contributed to small businesses trying to get back on their feet. And with every project, Benjamin found himself growing closer to the people of the town, especially Aaron and Maria. Through it all, Benjamin realized that the true impact of his actions wasn't measured in dollars or recognition. It was in the lives he touched and the way he helped build something that could last far beyond himself. As Benjamin stood on the porch of Aaron's house one evening, watching the sun dip below the hills, he finally felt at peace. He was no longer chasing success. He was building something more meaningful, and it was a journey that would last the rest of his life. The days in Cedar Ridge passed swiftly, each one feeling more meaningful than the last. As Benjamin became increasingly involved in the town's revitalization efforts, he began to notice subtle transformations in himself. He found himself listening more deeply, not only to the words people spoke, but also to the stories that resided in their silences. The townspeople, in turn, started seeing him as more than just a wealthy outsider, but as someone who truly understood the essence of community, someone who genuinely cared. Aaron, the quiet observer, became Benjamin's closest ally. The young boy, whose humility had deeply affected Benjamin from the very beginning, had grown into a source of inspiration for him. Aaron's curiosity and ambition, fueled by a love for learning, began to thrive. The skills he had acquired from the construction workers during the renovation blossomed into a passion. Soon, he was building things of his own, small but meaningful projects that made a tangible difference in the town. One afternoon, as Benjamin sat in the diner, a place he had come to frequent both for the food and the conversation, Aaron approached him with a wide grin. "Benjamin, I've been thinking about something," Aaron said, his voice full of excitement. Benjamin raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "I want to start a community workshop," Aaron said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "A place where kids like me can come and learn skills, carpentry, mechanics, maybe even a little bit of engineering. We could teach each other and see what it's like to create something with our hands." Benjamin's heart swelled with pride and admiration. Aaron had always been a dreamer, but this idea, this vision, was far beyond his years. It wasn't just about creating physical things. It was about building confidence, nurturing independence, and helping young people discover their purpose. "I think that's a brilliant idea," Benjamin said, leaning forward. "And I'll help you make it happen. We'll need to find a space, gather tools, and maybe even bring in some mentors. But we'll do it." Aaron's face lit up. "Really?" "Absolutely," Benjamin said, smiling. "This is the kind of project that can change lives. It's just the beginning, Aaron. Just the beginning of something much bigger." As the workshop took shape, it quickly became a thriving hub of activity and opportunity. Benjamin and Aaron worked tirelessly to transform an old unused building on the edge of town into a vibrant space for learning and creativity. Local businesses generously donated supplies, and even the town's teenagers began to pitch in, eager to learn new skills and contribute to their community. For Benjamin, the workshop became far more than just a project. It symbolized the transformation he had undergone. The man who had once measured his worth by the numbers in his bank account now found his value in the lives he touched. He visited the workshop every day, not as a benefactor, but as a mentor. He shared the little knowledge he had, learned from the young people around him, and watched them grow in ways he hadn't imagined. Aaron flourished in this new environment. His natural leadership abilities began to shine as he took charge of the workshop's daily operations. No longer the quiet boy Benjamin had first met, Aaron had grown into a young man with a clear vision. He inspired others to believe in themselves, empowering the group to push past their limits. The workshop buzzed with energy, tools clanging, people chatting, and a sense of pride building with every completed project. It was clear that this was more than just a place to learn. It was a place to grow, to contribute, and to build something that would last. One evening, as Benjamin sat on the porch of Aaron's house, watching the sun dip below the hills once more, Maria joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. Lately, she had been unusually quiet, and Benjamin couldn't help but notice the change in her. There was a newfound contentment in her, an inner peace that radiated from the way she looked at her son, the way she observed the town coming together. "Thank you, Benjamin," Maria said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. Benjamin turned toward her, surprised. "For what?" "For being here," she said, her eyes gentle. "For seeing Aaron. For seeing us." Benjamin smiled, accepting the coffee she handed him. "I haven't done nearly as much as you think. It's Aaron who's done all the work. And this town has taught me more than I ever could have imagined." Maria shook her head, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "You gave us a chance, Benjamin. You gave Aaron a chance. He's becoming the person I always knew he could be. But with you, he's found someone who truly believes in him. Not just because he's my son, but because you see something in him. You've given him, and all of us, a gift." Benjamin's heart swelled with emotion. This was the kind of fulfillment he had been searching for all his life. Not the praise or accolades that came with business deals, but the quiet, genuine gratitude of a family whose lives had been transformed by a simple act of kindness. And in that moment, as he sat beside Maria, Benjamin understood. This was what truly mattered. As the months passed, the workshop continued to thrive. It had become a cornerstone of the community, a place where young people came to learn new skills, build relationships, and chase their dreams. Benjamin and Aaron's bond grew stronger too. They were no longer just mentor and protege, but partners in a vision they had both come to believe in deeply. Together, they had ignited something far greater than they had anticipated, a movement that had spread beyond Cedar Ridge, inspiring other towns to start similar initiatives. For Benjamin, this workshop represented his true legacy. It wasn't the fortune he had amassed over his years, but the lives he had touched, the doors he had opened, and the community he had helped to build. He had stopped chasing success in the traditional sense and had found a deeper, more lasting fulfillment. It was in the laughter of children learning new skills, in the pride of young adults taking charge of their futures, and in the satisfaction of knowing he had given everything he could to the world. As he stood, gazing out at the town that had come to life in ways he had never expected, Benjamin finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't about money or status. True wealth was measured by the lives you impacted, the love you shared, and the legacy you left behind. And with that realization, Benjamin Carter felt at peace for the first time in his life. The town of Cedar Ridge had changed, and so had Benjamin. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far more powerful than he ever imagined. As the community rallied around the workshop and the young people blossomed under its influence, Benjamin found himself in a place of true contentment. However, one evening, as he sat alone in the newly renovated home he had shared with Aaron and Maria for the past few weeks, something shifted. It was subtle at first, a fleeting thought, a question that lingered in his mind. He had done so much for Cedar Ridge. Could he do more? Was his journey truly complete? The next morning, Benjamin woke with a sense of urgency. He stood in the kitchen, staring out at the hills beyond the town. The world was slowly coming to life as the first rays of dawn filtered through the trees. There was no doubt in his mind. He needed to take a step further. He went to the workshop, where Aaron was already hard at work, organizing the tools and preparing for the day. Seeing the young man so focused and at home in his element reminded Benjamin of the transformation that had taken place, not just in the town, but in Aaron as well. The young man had become a symbol of what this community could achieve when given the opportunity. But Aaron still needed someone by his side, a mentor, a guiding hand. And so did the town. Benjamin approached him, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. "Aaron, I've been thinking," he began, "about how much we've accomplished here, how much you've accomplished." Aaron paused, wiping his hands on his jeans, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What do you mean?" Benjamin took a deep breath. "What if we expanded the workshop? What if we took this to the next level? What if we built something that could benefit not just Cedar Ridge, but all the surrounding communities? We could open branches in other towns, create more opportunities, offer more skills, maybe even start a foundation." Aaron's eyes widened, disbelief written all over his face. "You're serious? You want to make this bigger?" "Yes," Benjamin said firmly. "It's time to take it to the next level. We've already changed lives here, but we can do more. You and I, we can make sure this place, this idea spreads. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of faith. I need your help." Aaron was silent for a moment, his gaze distant as he considered the proposition. He had never been one to think big, never really had the chance, but now that chance was right in front of him. After a long pause, his face lit up with a renewed fire. "Let's do it. Let's make it bigger. Let's change the world." Benjamin smiled, a sense of purpose flooding him. They were no longer just two individuals with an idea. They were partners in something far greater than themselves, a movement that would change lives and build a future for countless others. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Aaron by his side, Benjamin knew there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Together, they would take Cedar Ridge and the world by storm. That afternoon, Benjamin made a few phone calls to his old contacts, people who could help get this initiative off the ground. But this time, instead of asking for business opportunities or financial support, he was asking for something different. He was asking for a chance to make a real difference, to build something that would last, not just for him, but for the generations that would come after. It wasn't long before the pieces began to fall into place. The idea of the workshop spread like wildfire, catching the attention of philanthropists, local governments, and educational foundations. What Benjamin and Aaron had created was no longer just a local effort. It had become a movement. Soon, Benjamin found himself traveling to neighboring towns, speaking with leaders and community organizers, sharing his vision for a network of workshop shops that could provide hands-on skills, mentorship, and opportunity for young people everywhere. As the months went by, Cedar Ridge remained the heart of this growing initiative. Town became a model, a beacon for others to follow. Benjamin and Aaron worked together, hand in hand, forging partnerships, securing funding, and establishing new locations. What began as a humble workshop grew into a nationwide network, providing skills training, education, and hope for countless young people in underserved communities. Through it all, Benjamin had not only discovered the joy of giving back to others, but also the fulfillment of seeing Aaron step into his potential. He had watched the boy who had once helped him change a tire now help others find their own paths. Aaron's leadership was evident, and he became the face of the initiative, someone who represented the strength of the community, now someone who had the power to inspire others with his unwavering belief in hard work and self-reliance. 1 year later, as Benjamin and Aaron stood at the grand opening of the latest workshop in a neighboring town, Benjamin took a moment to reflect. The town of Cedar Ridge was thriving. Aaron had grown into a young man of remarkable character, and the ripple effect of their work had extended far beyond anything Benjamin could have imagined. As the crowd gathered around them, ready to celebrate this new chapter, Benjamin couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. But it wasn't just for the work they had done. It was for the lives they had touched, the hope they had reignited, and the future they had helped shape. "I never could have imagined this," Benjamin said quietly to Aaron, his voice full of gratitude. "Neither could I," Aaron replied, smiling. "But we're just getting started." And with that, they both knew the journey was far from over. The work they had done had already changed lives. But the legacy they were building, the one they were creating together, would last far beyond them, a beacon of hope and possibility for generations to come. The buzz surrounding the new workshops was undeniable. As word spread, towns across the region reached out, eager to replicate the success Benjamin and Aaron had cultivated in Cedar Ridge. The blueprint was simple but powerful. Provide young people with tangible skills, give them the tools to build their futures, and create an environment where self-reliance and community support were paramount. But it wasn't just about the workshops anymore. It was about something larger, something deeper. Benjamin, now in his early 80s, had found himself a new sense of purpose in life. He had once been driven solely by financial success, by the desire to build an empire. But now, as he looked at the network they'd created, he realized that the true wealth was in the relationships they had fostered, in the opportunities they had created, and in the people whose lives they had changed. It was the legacy of Cedar Ridge, a legacy not of money, but of impact. It was a warm afternoon when Benjamin stood on the balcony of his newly built office in Cedar Ridge. The view was different from the one he'd had at his mansion in the city. The mountains stretched out in the distance, green and vibrant, a far cry from the concrete skyline he used to gaze at. The air smelled of pine and earth, a refreshing change. In front of him was the busy town square, full of life and energy. Families walked by, kids laughing as they played, and young adults headed off to work at the various shops and offices that had sprung up since the workshops had started. It was no longer a town struggling to survive. It was a thriving, growing community. Aaron, now in his early 20s, had become the face of their initiative. He'd helped mentor dozens of young people, not only teaching them how to build houses or repair engines, but also instilling in them a sense of purpose and community responsibility. In many ways, Aaron had become what Benjamin had once hoped to be, a person who could lead by example, inspire others, and leave behind a legacy that would last. Benjamin could hear the faint sound of Aaron's voice from below, laughing as he worked with a group of teenagers in the workshop's new space. It brought a smile to his face. He had watched Aaron grow from a boy who fixed a flat tire on the side of the road to a leader who was now inspiring an entire generation. The town had changed. The initiative had spread. And Benjamin, in his later years, had found not just a legacy, but peace. A deep, enduring peace that came from knowing he had helped create something that would last far beyond his own lifetime. The day arrived when Benjamin felt it was time to officially pass the torch. The workshops were running smoothly, expanding faster than he could have imagined. But more importantly, they had created a ripple effect, a culture of giving, of mentoring, of passing on what had been learned. And Benjamin realized that, in many ways, the time had come for him to step back. The community no longer needed him in the way it once had. It had found its own strength. At a community gathering in Cedar Ridge, Benjamin stood up on stage, his voice steady as he spoke to the crowd. I have spent much of my life chasing after success in ways that only benefited myself. I sought wealth, recognition, and status. But I have learned something far more valuable. True success is not what you achieve, but what you leave behind. It is not the money you accumulate, but the lives you touch, the communities you build, and the people you help to rise. The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. Aaron stood at the back, his arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He knew this moment had been coming for a while. Benjamin's journey had been a remarkable one, but the future had always belonged to the next generation. It was Aaron's time now. Benjamin paused, his gaze meeting Aaron's across the room. It's time for me to step back. I'm handing over the reins to someone who has not only helped me build this legacy, but who will carry it forward with the passion and integrity it deserves. He turned to Aaron, gesturing for him to join him on stage. The crowd erupted into applause, but Aaron's face remained humble. He had never sought the spotlight. He simply wanted to continue the work they had started together. As he stood next to Benjamin, he could feel the weight of the moment settle over him. This wasn't just a passing of leadership. It was a passing of trust, of hope for the future. As weeks passed, Benjamin began spending more time in the quiet of his home, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He still visited the workshops from time to time, offering advice when asked, but he had learned to step back. He found peace in knowing that Cedar Ridge was thriving without him needing to be at the center of it all. Aaron had proven more than capable, and the entire initiative was in good hands. Benjamin felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing he had helped to create something that was now bigger than him, a movement that would continue to grow, evolving with each new generation, just as it had with Aaron. As he sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the hills for the final time, he realized that his legacy was secure. The work would carry on, and the community would remain strong, rooted in the values they had all worked so hard to nurture. Benjamin had found what he had been searching for all along: purpose, connection, and a legacy that was built on giving, not receiving. It was, in every way, his greatest achievement. One evening, as Benjamin sat on the porch of his small cabin just outside of town, watching the sun set behind the mountains, he received a call from Maria. Her voice was warm but filled with excitement. "Benjamin, you won't believe it. We've been approached by a group in New York. They want to expand the workshops nationwide. They've seen what we've done here, and they want to take it to cities all across the country." Benjamin chuckled softly. "I guess we've started something bigger than we ever imagined." Maria's laughter echoed through the phone. "Yes, but we're not done yet. We're just getting started." As Benjamin hung up the phone, he sat back in his chair, staring out at the vast expanse of green before him. It was a beautiful moment of quiet satisfaction, but more than that, it was a moment of knowing. He had left his mark on the world, and through Aaron and the workshop network, that mark would continue to grow. Cedar Ridge had become the heart of a movement, one that touched not only lives in the small town, but extended its reach to cities across the country. What started with a flat tire and a chance encounter had blossomed into a legacy that would continue to shape generations for years to come. And as for Benjamin, though his role in the project had changed, his heart swelled with pride, knowing that he had helped spark something that would far outlast him. The future, as Aaron had said, was just beginning. The months passed, and Cedar Ridge continued to thrive. Benjamin, now fully retired, spent his days in quiet reflection, visiting the workshops occasionally and seeing the progress Aaron had made in growing the program. The workshops had expanded into several neighboring towns, and with the backing of new partners from larger cities, it looked like the initiative would soon be available across the state and perhaps even further beyond. But there was one thing Benjamin had come to realize. No matter how much the project expanded, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something more he was meant to do. The purpose that had initially been ignited when he met Aaron still burned within him. He had helped create something meaningful, but it wasn't enough. He had to do more. It was one crisp autumn morning when Benjamin sat at his desk, looking out over the horizon from his office in Cedar Ridge. A new idea was beginning to take shape in his mind, and it wasn't about more money or bigger projects. It was about legacy, truly leaving something behind that would last for generations to come, something that would change the way the world looked at the underprivileged, the overlooked, and the marginalized. His mind raced with the possibilities. A foundation dedicated to funding education and mentorship programs for young people in need, regardless of where they lived or what their circumstances were. A scholarship fund to help those who didn't have access to the same opportunities others took for granted. It wasn't just about building skills. It was about creating a network of people who would lift each other up, who would pass on the same compassion and commitment to their communities that had sparked the initiative in Cedar Ridge. He knew this wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, opposition, and countless obstacles along the way. But for the first time in a long while, Benjamin felt a sense of certainty. He had spent much of his life chasing success in the form of wealth and status, but now he was chasing something deeper, something more fulfilling. Benjamin smiled to himself, the same quiet joy settling in his heart. The future was calling, and he was ready to answer. He called Aaron to his office, the young man's voice bright and eager on the other end of the line. "Hey, Benjamin, what's going on?" Benjamin smiled at the sound of Aaron's enthusiasm. "I need to see you, Aaron. It's time we talk about something important." An hour later, Aaron arrived, his usual easy confidence in his stride, though there was a quiet curiosity in his eyes as he sat across from Benjamin. The older man studied him for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking, Aaron, what we've started here in Cedar Ridge, the workshops, the jobs, it's all been incredible, but there's a bigger picture. This is just one town, one small community. Imagine, though, if we could take the principles we've built here, education, empowerment, self-sufficiency, and bring them to even more communities, especially the ones that have been left behind by traditional systems." Aaron nodded, waiting for Benjamin to continue. "I want us to start an initiative that goes beyond construction skills or job training. I want to create a program that helps rebuild communities, not just through industry, but by providing resources for mental health, entrepreneurship, sustainable living practices, and family support. It would be a comprehensive, holistic approach to healing and uplifting people who've been written off by society." Aaron's eyes widened. He hadn't expected Benjamin to suggest something so ambitious. But as the words sank in, the fire of possibility lit up in him, and he could see the vision coming to life in his mind's eye. This wasn't just about changing lives through jobs. This was about transforming entire communities from the inside out. Benjamin leaned forward, his voice steady, but filled with the passion he had for this new vision. "We've seen the power of this program firsthand, Aaron. People who were once struggling, feeling lost, have found their sense of purpose through the work we've done. What if we could multiply that? What if we could create a ripple effect where people no longer felt like they were stuck in cycles of poverty or despair? What if they felt seen, heard, and empowered to create their own futures?" Aaron swallowed, the weight of the idea settling on him. "That sounds incredible, Benjamin, but it's huge. We'd need more than just resources. We'd need the right people, the right partnerships." Benjamin nodded. "We've already started reaching out to people, foundations, philanthropists, organizations that align with our vision. But we need someone to lead this effort, Aaron. Someone who understands the heart of it, who isn't afraid to push the boundaries. Someone who knows how to make the impossible happen." Aaron stared at him for a moment, processing. It was clear to him now what Benjamin was asking. He was asking him to step up, not just as a leader of the workshops, but as the leader of something far more transformative. This was an opportunity to change the course of countless lives, to build a movement that could sweep across the country and even beyond. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, planning, and strategizing. Aaron dove into the project with everything he had, reaching out to the local and national leaders who could help make this vision a reality. He knew that he was no longer just following Benjamin's lead. He was carving out his own path, one that could shape the future of not only Cedar Ridge, but countless other forgotten communities. Benjamin, while still active in the process, began to take a step back, letting Aaron take the reins with the team they had assembled. Every now and then, Benjamin would stop by the office or visit a workshop to offer his advice, but he knew deep in his heart that it was time for Aaron to lead. The boy he had once met on a lonely road, fixing his flat tire, had grown into a visionary, and Benjamin had no doubts that he was the right person to carry the mission forward. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting, Aaron stood on the porch of the newly expanded community center, looking out over the town that had given him so much. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Behind him, the buzz of conversation and activity from inside the center continued as the staff and volunteers worked late into the night to prepare for the launch of the national initiative. The excitement in the air was palpable, and Aaron couldn't help but smile. He turned around to see Benjamin approaching, his familiar calm presence a grounding force in the whirlwind of energy surrounding them. "How's it going?" Benjamin asked, his eyes crinkling with a knowing smile. Aaron shrugged, but there was a sparkle in his eye. "It's crazy, but it feels right. This is what we were meant to do." Benjamin nodded in agreement. "I always knew you were the one to take this further. You've got everything it takes." As they stood there together, side by side, overlooking the work they had done and the future they were building, both men understood that the true measure of their success wouldn't be found in the number of towns they transformed or the programs they created. It would be in the people whose lives they had changed, in the hope they had inspired, and in the legacy they would leave behind for generations to come. And in that quiet moment, as the evening sky stretched above them, they knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was long, but the journey had already begun, and together, they were ready to walk it. As the months passed, the initiative grew in ways neither Benjamin nor Aaron had ever anticipated. The project, now called Building Hope, was a beacon for other communities across the nation. What had started in Cedar Ridge was slowly becoming a movement, one that was changing lives, reshaping entire neighborhoods, and giving people a second chance. It wasn't just about construction or jobs. It was about healing, empowerment, and teaching people how to rebuild their lives from the ground up. Benjamin had become more of a mentor than a leader, watching proudly as Aaron steered the project forward. Aaron's natural charisma, vision, and compassion had made him a figurehead not just for Cedar Ridge, but for the movement as a whole. They had established partnerships with national organizations, secured government funding, and even attracted media attention. The program was slowly being recognized as a blueprint for how communities in need could truly thrive. But for Benjamin, the most rewarding part wasn't the fame or success of the project. It was watching the ripple effect of their work. Families who had once been trapped in cycles of poverty were now finding their footing, starting businesses, going back to school, and, most importantly, believing in themselves. Communities were not just surviving, they were growing, flourishing, and inspiring others to follow suit. One day, as Benjamin sat on the porch of his new home in Cedar Ridge, now a modest yet comfortable residence, he reflected on how far he had come. His life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. No longer was he the isolated, wealthy man who lived in his mansion, surrounded by luxury and wealth, but someone who had rediscovered the joy of genuine human connection. His wealth was no longer defined by the number of zeros in his bank account, but by the lives he had touched. The morning sun cast a golden light over the Appalachian hills as Aaron walked up the path to Benjamin's house, his familiar face beaming with enthusiasm. In the year since they had launched Building Hope, Aaron had become a national leader. He was invited to conferences, interviewed on television, and had even met with lawmakers to help further the cause. But despite the newfound recognition, Aaron had stayed humble, always returning to Cedar Ridge to check on the progress of the community. "Morning, Benjamin," Aaron greeted him, his voice as bright as ever. Benjamin chuckled, shaking his head. "I thought you'd be busy saving the world by now." Aaron grinned. "I've got a few more worlds to save, but there's no place like home, right?" They both shared a laugh, but there was a certain weight in the air, a quiet understanding between them. The work they had started together had become something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It was no longer just about fixing a flat tire on a lonely Tennessee road. It was about building something that could change the future for so many people. "I was thinking," Benjamin began, his voice quieter now, "we've done a lot, Aaron, more than I thought was possible, but there's still so much to do, so many more people to reach. This can't be the end." Aaron looked at him, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Benjamin paused, looking out over the town, the rolling hills stretching in the distance. "I mean, I think we're just getting started. Building hope has proven what's possible when people believe in themselves and in each other. But we can do more. We can turn this into something global. There's not a single place in this world where people don't need hope. We could inspire entire nations, Aaron." The vision hung in the air between them, vast and intimidating, but Aaron's eyes sparkled with the same fire that had burned in him since the first time he'd helped Benjamin on that quiet road. "I'm in," Aaron said without hesitation. "Wherever we go, we'll build, together." Benjamin smiled, a deep sense of peace washing over him. He knew that whatever the future held, they had already changed the world in ways no one could have predicted. As the days turned into years, Building Hope expanded across borders. From small, rural towns to bustling cities across the globe, Benjamin and Aaron's initiative became a force for social change, helping people rise above their circumstances. What had begun as a simple act of kindness on a lonely Tennessee road had evolved into a movement that had reached millions. Benjamin, now in his early 80s, still worked quietly behind the scenes, offering guidance when needed, but content to watch Aaron lead with the same compassion and determination that had always defined him. And as Benjamin stood in a newly renovated community center, a sense of fulfillment washed over him. He had found his purpose not in wealth, but in the impact he had made on the world and the legacy he had built with Aaron. In the end, it wasn't about the millions of dollars he had earned or the luxury he had accumulated. It was about the countless lives that had been transformed, the hope that had been sparked, and the future that had been forever changed. And as Benjamin looked at Aaron, he knew the road ahead was bright, brighter than he ever could have imagined. And just like that, the journey was only beginning. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. We truly appreciate you following along with Benjamin and Aaron's journey and the message of hope, transformation, and human connection that it brings. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to stay updated on more inspiring stories like this one. Your support means the world to us. Every like, share, and subscription helps us continue creating content that touches hearts and brings about positive change. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Once again, thank you for being a part of this journey with us. We look forward to sharing more stories with you. Until next time, take care and keep spreading kindness wherever you go. Thank you for watching. Please note, this video was generated using AI technology to read the story. While we strive for accuracy and clarity, there may be some occasional errors or mispronunciations. We kindly ask for your understanding and patience if any mistakes occur. If you notice any issues or areas for improvement, please feel free to leave a comment below. Your feedback is invaluable and will help us enhance the quality of our future videos. We appreciate your support and engagement. Thank you for being part of our community. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and we'll see you in the next video.